Most companies, the honest answer is someone remembers. A 20-person company can have more seams than people. You're really one resignation away from no system. You've written something that you hope will happen, but you haven't built a system that makes sure that it does. That we don't write procedures. We build systems that make the right behavior the only behavior. So let's start with the first piece of the puzzle. It's the first tool, and I call it the production flow model. This is just a way to think about how things flow through your business. And every business, no matter what it does, has at minimum these 4 key functions. Things are going to flow through in this order. There is marketing, who's responsible for finding your clients. It goes into sales that then converts them into clients. Sales turns things over to delivery, who serves your clients. And then it moves into finance so that you can get paid. So between each of these functions, the work has to cross a border. Marketing has to hand something to sales. Sales has to hand something to delivery. Delivery has to hand something to finance to get paid. Those crossings are your seams. 3 big ones at minimum in every company before we count anything else. And we do need to count more because the seams don't stop at just these borders. If you zoom in to any one of the functions in your organization, operations is a great example of this. The work is changing hands constantly, right? In a manufacturing company, a services firm, same types of picture. An estimate becomes a work order. A work order has to go into scheduling. Scheduling has to go to materials. Production has to hand to quality. Quality hands to shipping. Shipping hands to finance for the invoice. Like every one of those steps is a seam, right? It's a seam is anywhere important information has to change hands. It's both between departments and sometimes it's just between 2 desks that sit right next to each other. That's still a seam. Now, I want to make a quick aside here, which is that most organizations that I come into, this is a classic, right? Marketing and sales are at war with each other. Marketing swears the leads are good. Sales swears the leads are junk, right? And marketing just won't listen to what they have to say. Both sides have the data. Both sides are just exhausted by it. It shows up like a people problem. 9 times out of 10, it's actually because nobody has ever designed what crosses that seam. What does a lead have to include? What triggers the handoff from marketing to sales? What does sales send back so that marketing can adjust? It's 2 competent teams, 1 undesigned seam, and years of blame flowing in both directions. Even though it looks like a people conflict, it's simply a gap. It's one of the seams that we need to fill in order to have this smooth experience of the flow of your business. So that is the first framework to understand is the flow of a business. And in your organization, you have a flow. There's an opportunity to define your flow. Now, the second tool is a set of 5 questions. This is how you're going to be able to fill those gaps. We've used our flow diagram to understand where all of our potential gaps are. Now we're going to look at those gaps and begin to understand how close are we to having them actually defined. When you point them at a seam, what is invisible in your business actually becomes visible. So 1, origin. Where does this information come from? 2, destination. Where does it need to land? 3, trigger. What makes it move? Not who is supposed to move it, but what actually fires the handoff. And hold on to this one, because of the 5, this is the question that we need to go back to pretty regularly. So everyone can answer origin, everyone can answer destination, but then when you ask what fires, what's the trigger that fires the handoff? Most companies, the honest answer is someone remembers. And, that's just not good enough. The 4th is format. What shape does it travel in? Is it a structured handoff, a Slack message? 5, failure mode. When it doesn't arrive, what breaks downstream? How long until someone notices? So those are the 5. Origin, destination, trigger, format, failure mode. Let me take you through, I'm going to just kind of take you through an example. All right. I'll run all 5 on one of the biggest seams in most services businesses. And that is the border between selling and delivering, so that we can see like exactly how these 5 questions work. So a sale closes. 6 weeks of conversations have to move from your salesperson's head into your delivery team's hands. There were promises that were made. There were scope nuances. The client maybe mentioned budget concerns. The client said, sometimes they say things 2 or 3 times because they really want to make sure that you understand that that matters. So what's the origin? The origin is the salesperson's calls, notes, and memory. What's the destination? Well, the destination is whoever owns that client from day one. And again, it needs to be defined exactly what's the destination. What's the trigger for that handoff? Is it a signed contract? Is it an actual scheduled handoff meeting? Is it just an email that gets sent that says, Bobby signed the contract today? What's the format of the handoff? Do we have a clearly defined handoff document? Again, or is it just a Slack message that goes without a whole lot of context? And then what's the failure mode? What happens if that seam is rocky or doesn't really occur? Does the client have to repeat themselves and they just feel like a level of lack of service? Does a team have to rediscover a scope from scratch? Right? Do some special promises that get made sort of surface the first time in an invoice dispute? So these are the types of things that happen when you have a seam that is not fully completed. So when I work with my clients, we build this flow, and then we look at the seams and we grade them. We grade them into 4 states for these different seams. We grade them because I need to know where the work is falling so that we can decide which of these seams we should fill first. And based on the answer to those 5 questions, it can help you understand what is the most important seam to fill first. So what are the 4 states that these handoff points could be in? The ideal state is to say it's designed. This is when an explicit system exists. You've got a trigger, you've got a format, you've got a route. It's all defined, it's all working. And you know that you're here when you could have many of your people out of the office and the trigger would still fire. The information would still be transferred. If the answer to that is yes, then it's in designed state. And you can go one level down, and I just call that informal. And informal seam works by habit. It works by goodwill, right? It works because the employee's been here for 20 years and they just know. The thing is, there's an interesting thing about informal seams because informal often feels really comfortable. It feels like culture, but it's the one where you're most vulnerable. You're really one resignation away from no system. So the next level down is founder dependent or executive dependent. So you or a key member of the team are the trigger. You are the route. You are the translator. This test is brutal and simple. So you aren't there for some time. You watch the handoff stop. Those are the things where it's founder dependent or executive dependent. Finally, the fourth state it could be in is just missing. Like literally nothing exists. And information simply doesn't travel and everyone downstream just works without it. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but I literally have a client where the team in the field, when I started working with them, would just restart certain steps because the information just didn't flow. Literally, something in their business gets done twice in two different ways because information didn't move. Now, when I map a whole company this way, the results are always shocking. A 20-person company can have more seams than people. Maybe a handful come back designed. Most of them come back informal. There are plenty of them that are founder dependent or executive dependent. And sometimes, like in that previous example, there are a few that are missing that just never got noticed. And I can go look at it and see there's an accountability chart. So on paper, the company feels structured, but in reality, there's a lot of improvisation happening. So now you might be asking yourself, but my SOPs are designed to address this very thing. So I want to make a distinction clear because they can sound the same, but I promise that they're different. See, the execution architecture is mapping a flow. It's writing down all 5 elements. Origin, where does this information come from? Destination, where does it need to land? What's the trigger? Not who's supposed to move it, but what actually triggers the movement. The format, this is the designed format for what gets moved specifically. And by the way, this format move alone can solve so many problems. And then failure mode. What happens when it doesn't move? We ask this question so that we can see how critical a particular seam is to our business. It helps our team to understand how their role fits into the organization, and it helps us understand the kind of trigger we should design. You know, a mission critical seam should never be left up to a person. It deserves an automated trigger. It deserves something that ensures that it keeps moving. But you cannot design a trigger for a flow you've never mapped. So you have to design the flow. The flow and the map come first every time. And this is totally different than the SOP in the cabinet. You know, the giant manual that somebody spent all this time writing describes how everything should work. And if you're lucky, it gets opened when a new hire needs to get trained. Unfortunately, that training usually just highlights how different things really work from what was written in the SOP the last time the document was touched. So because of this, right, because most of you have done the work, you have an SOP or a drive, you decided that the writing down part doesn't work. But it's not the writing it down part. Like the whole point of the execution architecture is to write things down. It's the belief that writing it down was the fix in and of itself. Right? Some of your SOPs absolutely describe a handoff at a seam, but it rarely defines the format. It almost never includes a trigger. So moving the work still depends on somebody remembering to consult a binder. It's not a real process. You've written something that you hope will happen, but you haven't built a system that makes sure that it does. So we draw the map, we draw the flow, seam by seam in writing. That's the blueprint. You can't build a building without a blueprint. Then you go in and you do the wiring. You design how the seams get filled. And that is how you take a trigger off of human memory. You build it into the environment your people are working in. The trigger fires from a tool they touch every day. The necessary format becomes the default, right? Not like something you do when you're feeling extra special. We're building a structure that has a handoff happen because the system makes it happen. See, I talk about with my clients that we don't write procedures. We build systems that make the right behavior the only behavior. And the map is how you see the flow. The trigger is what makes it move. Now, stay with me for one more minute because this is where the last 3 episodes and this one are going to become one conversation. Look at your founder dependent seams. They exist for one of 2 reasons. One reason is there's no route around you that was ever designed. So the information comes to you because there's just nowhere else for it to go. And that is a structural gap. It lives above the waterline, and everything that we just talked about will fix those types of gaps. You draw the route, you build the trigger. It's no longer going to be founder dependent. There is a second reason why something is in founder dependent state. The second reason is that a route exists or easily could exist, but it still comes to you and that the team still checks in with you first. It comes to you because some part of it coming to you feels better. It feels like your job. It feels like your responsibility. That is not a structure gap. That lives below the waterline, and we can build the maps and we can put in the wiring diagrams, and it will most likely stay there with you. Now, I just want to tell you, I have, for myself, plenty of founder gaps. I have plenty of them where it's on me. And I do this for a living, and I still catch myself sitting in the middle of a route in my own business that could have been designed away. It wasn't there because I didn't know better. It was there because I feel something's working for me when I have that role in the business. So when I ask you to really look at reason 2, I'm asking from right beside you, right? Not from above you. So in episode 3, I showed you how the work you love can hold you in the wrong seat. This is the other half of that conversation. Sometimes what holds you isn't love. It's that you built a company where you are the flow, and being the flow has become the job. So again, both zones above the waterline and below the waterline must move together. So you build the route and you work internally to be able to release the route, to redefine what your job is when that route isn't yours to hold anymore. If you do one without the other, well, that's why things don't stick. When you do both, you have the opportunity for the work that you're doing to actually stick, for your business to get better. So some of you are saying to yourself, well, I just care the most. So no one is going to do this the way I will. You can talk about all this all you want. I'm going to keep this one. Here's the thing. I don't want you to stop caring. That care is the source of what makes you and your company uniquely valuable in the marketplace. What I'd like for you to do is question, where does the caring live? Because care that lives in your hands means the work moves when you move forever. But care that lives in the design keeps the work moving at all times, whether you're available, whether you're on vacation, whether you're in the room. Consider it's the same care, but at a higher altitude. Now, the invitation for this week is to take a seam in your business and work the 5 questions. Take the stalled piece of work you've been holding since the top of this episode and find its seam. Where exactly did it go still? Was it between selling and delivering, between marketing and selling, somewhere on the operations floor? Name the people on either side of that spot. Then I'd like you to get those 2 people together, maybe 20 minutes. You're going to go through these 5 questions out loud, all of you together. Where does the information come from? Where does it need to land? What triggers it? What shape does it travel in? And what breaks when it doesn't arrive? You're going to watch something pretty interesting happen. Whatever was going on between the people involved in the seam will shift because they have a shared problem to solve. This is no longer about one against the other. Why did you do what you did? Why did you do what you did? It's now the 2 of them against a problem. And that may be the first time that has ever happened, and it will transform their working relationship. Now, once you've done this, you'll be able to decide what actions to take. You know what's possible inside your own organization. And if you need help figuring that out, how to really install this fix, if you need help going through this, well, that is what I do. So feel free to reach out. There is one caveat I want to mention when running this process yourself with your team members. You need to be honest about getting a clear answer. When someone says, well, usually Marissa, that is not a designed seam. You need to write down what happens in reality, rate where it is, make the honest assessment of whether that seam is a problem or not. And if it is, go about the actions to change the process in your business to give you all 5 of those components so that you do have a designed seam. So that's it. 1 seam, 5 questions, see what you learn and see what you might be able to resolve with this really simple process. Now, if you have the experience of holding seams in your organizations, again, sometimes it's because a route was never drawn and some of it's because you can't let go of it. Those are 2 different problems with 2 different fixes, and you can find out which one it is by taking the waterline check. It's a simple process you can take. It'll tell you whether your constraint is above the waterline in structure or below the waterline in something only you can change. That link is in the description. And if any of this has made you want to have a conversation, you can also find an opportunity to book a conversation with me on that. Just remember, your accountability chart tells you who owns the work. The flow decides whether the work moves. The cracks were never in your people. Go find your seam and fill it. I'm Dori Etter. This is Below the Waterline. See you next week.